I love people. I love all the wonderful people capable of expressing themselves through art so that we can all share that one thing we have in common, emotions. I love getting inspired, rebelling, falling in love, crying at a painting, at a sculpture, or at the sun. I love art because when we contemplate it, everyone, each and every one of us can get some move, that we become unique and different. Because art only exists if someone's admiring it. Because really, the work of art is you.
Of your conviction, summon the courage of your conviction. Hold it high, knowing you could lose. Dance as if there's no one there.
Wagner, a master connoisseur of the Germanic spirit, composed this famously stirring music to describe some marvelous beings from Norse mythology, the Valkyries. Daughters of Odin, the god of wisdom and war, the 9 Valkyries had a simple purpose: to tirelessly ride in search of the bravest heroes slain in the battlefield and take them to Valhalla, the home of the gods. A luxurious and majestic hall where only the brave, the very bravest, were allowed in and made warrior spirits who would join the eternal army of the gods. Building on this mythological idea, in the first half of the 19th century, King Ludwig I of Bavaria constructed, based on the Parthenon of Athens, his own Valhalla, in order to pay tribute to his Germanic heroes. Presided over by a sculpture of the king himself, the memorial holds busts of all his heroes and people of courage. But for all those heroes whose historical antiquity means no images existed, the king had installed plaques like the ones you see up there. So altogether, this Valhalla is home to 148 busts and 64 plaques of the most distinguished and important Germanic figures from the last 2,000 years. What an amazing place. It's full of real and mythological magic. Heroes, Valhalla, the Valkyries. Wouldn't it be amazing to be like them and ride around the world searching out the bravest of the brave? Yes, that's it. I'll do what they do. I'm going to go find 9 heroes for my own Valhalla. 9 people of courage who, for everything they achieved, have become my inspiration. And if it is all the same to you, while we are on this journey searching for my people of courage, I would like you to think about who are the heroes that each one of you would place in your personal Valhalla.
Mi primera valiente de mi Valhalla es mi abuela.
Lo primero, como niña, mi padre es un gran valiente.
Pues te diría que mi padre.
Might be cliché, but it would be my parents.
Porque a mi padre lo echaron del trabajo a los 40 años y ahora es profesor de yoga. Somos muy místicos en casa.
Possibly an art teacher. He was also a football coach. And he somehow or another managed to give me confidence to do both of those things. Play American football and do art.
Pero como mujer adulta, Naomi Klein es mi valiente.
¿Por qué?
Porque Naomi Klein nos abre los ojos, arriesga para decirnos verdades como puños.
The first hero in my personal particular Valhalla is actually the woman who played Evie in The Mummy. The Mummy came out when I was 4, and I just saw this strong, beautiful woman, you know, very independent.
Cuando me imagino a una persona valiente, no me imagino a un guerrero luchando ahí contra los malos.
¿Quién fue el valiente? ¿El que dirigió al batallón desde un estado mayor? ¿O el que estaba realmente pisando aquel campo de batalla y dio su vida?
Creo más en la valentía de las pequeñas cosas de la vida.
Claro, ser valiente para mí significa salir un poco de tu zona de confort. Y entonces cualquier persona que se dedique a las artes es valiente porque el arte no es un lugar de confort, pero sí que si quieres ser un héroe tienes que traspasar un poco ese límite y ponerte a ti mismo de alguna forma expuesta, ¿no? No sé, sin miedo, sin esconderse, creo.
Yo creo que para ser artista hay que ser, sin duda, valiente.
No sé, creo que va por aquí.
I'll start my list of the brave at the beginning. I'll head to the classical era, specifically back to a wonderful book called The Iliad by Homer, the book that tells the story of the Trojan War. Many were the heroes who displayed their bravery in this war. Agamemnon, Hector, Ajax the Great, Odysseus, Menelaus, Patroclus, but one stood out above all the rest. Achilles. He was the only one who dared to fight one-to-one with the leader of the Trojans, with his greatest rival, Hector. And even though Hector fought with the courage of a great warrior and struck his enemy with blows that boomed like thunderbolts, he couldn't subdue him, because Achilles was different from the other heroes. He was invincible. Or nearly invincible. As a child, his mother would bathe him in the sacred waters of the river Styx in order to turn him into an immortal. But she would dunk him in by the ankle. That's how his heel, the famous Achilles heel, the one part of his body to remain above water, became his only weak spot. A defect that makes him more human and makes him the first hero of my Valhalla. And who knows, maybe of yours as well. To really get to know Achilles, you've got to visit the Acropolis Museum in Athens. Among its many archaeological remains, there are ceramic pieces that not only provide extraordinary information about the era, but also let us know how artists back then portrayed the great poem by Homer, and what interests me most, how they portrayed this brave man I admire. And according to what the museum's curator told me, there's one piece that stands out in this sense above all the others.
This is a scene before he joins the battle again and gets killed.
Okay.
So it's
the Battle of Troy.
The Battle of Troy.
Okay.
According to the Iliad, the horses reply in human voice to Achilles, and they tell him, "Why are you going to the battle? You know you will get killed." And he says, "Nevertheless, I have to be there. I have to be in the battle."
Why?
He is determined to follow his path.
His path, his destiny.
His destiny, his path in life. He doesn't want to draw back.
Yeah, and his destiny is to die in the battle, to live forever?
To die in the battle, to stand by his comrades, to live forever, to revenge for the death of his friend Patroclus. He has all these duties on him, on his shoulders.
In the museum, we also see figures and sculptures that reaffirm the brilliant aesthetic of Greek art. But it's hard to find a statue depicting Achilles among them, because apparently they don't exist. Only one was salvaged, and sadly, seeing the state of its preservation, it likely goes unnoticed to most of the museum visitors. I wonder if the people who are going to see this Achilles and the other sculptures in the museum are aware how very different their color is from what the ancient Greeks would have gazed upon. I want to show you this statue, which is, who knows?
Athena?
You're wrong. No?
Aphrodite.
No.
Venus.
Aphrodite? No. You're wrong too. No?
No idea.
So this is a kind of peplos choré. This is one of the most famous statues of the ancient period in Greek art. The chorés were the ideal of feminine beauty. But when you think about a Greek statue, what color do you picture?
White.
White. But why white?
Because all the monuments is white or statues is white. You see films, all the is white.
All the statues are white, all the monuments are white. Sorry?
Because of marble?
Because of marble, because of the color of the marble, because of the color of the stone it has been made, right? But no, you're wrong, and that's the question, and that's the point, because the Greeks used to paint their statues. Did you know that?
No.
Not at all. No? They used to paint their statues with very bright, with very vivid colors, like the ones I got here with me. So, is there one volunteer, two volunteers, or three volunteers who would like to try to paint our peplos choré, to try to give our sculpture its color back?
I'll try.
You're on? You're in?
Yeah.
You're in too?
Yeah.
Okay, someone else? You're in too? Okay, let's go. All statues in antiquity were painted, and not just statues, so were buildings, pediments, reliefs. In ancient Greece, everything wore vivid primary colors, almost childlike. But the pigments they used couldn't withstand the march of time and didn't survive to today. It was later in the Renaissance that sculptors chose not to paint their works because they believed the Greek and Roman ones they so admired had no polychromy. That was how, over the centuries, the color white became associated with classical sculpture and architecture, eventually becoming synonymous with elegance and the sublime, which couldn't be more wrong. Can you imagine going back to designing a sculpture and architecture like the ancient Greeks did? To everything around us being polychromatic? I don't think I'd be wrong in saying it will help us in, at least, one aspect, in keeping our inner child alive. Children have two dreams, flying and being invisible. These big kids are having fun trying to make their dream or flying come true. Like Peter Pan, they glide through the air and spend a few happy seconds in Never Neverland.
Ce que je ressens quand je saute, c'est une immense sensation de liberté, sans limite, sans rien. Tout est possible. Rien ne peut nous limiter. La seule chose à laquelle on doit penser, c'est ouvrir bien avant le sol.
Do I think I'm very valiant to jump? For me, it's a natural thing. I mean, maybe other people think so, but for me, it's just what I'm made to do. I'm made to jump out of planes and try and fly.
¿De qué se trata la vida? Sino de hacer algo así que te excite y te ponga bien. Somos todos un poco Peter Pan allá arriba, ¿no? Yo creo.
Come on, we'll fly!
Fly? You can fly!
Wendy, come with me!
Oh dear, I mustn't. Think of Mother. Besides, I can't fly.
I'll teach you.
Would you teach John and Michael to fly too?
If you like.
John, wake up. There's a boy here who is to teach us to fly.
Then I shall get up. Hello, I am up.
How do you do it?
You just think lovely, wonderful thoughts and they lift you up in the air.
How wonderful!
Let's fly!
Peter Pan is my second person of courage. Every day he reminds me I should keep the spirit alive from when I was a boy and the world was a constant surprise. He reminds me about the bravery we need every day to take on people like Captain Hook himself, who don't believe in dreams, in imagination, not even in Never Neverland. He reminds me that even if I've never managed to fly, I shouldn't lose hope because the day I don't believe I can, that day will be the beginning of the end.
Que no, Peter Pan no es un valiente. Puede ser valiente por iluso y por inconsciente, pero ese no es mi modelo de valentía.
Peter's brave. Society demands that we grow up, and he dug in his heels and said no.
A mí siempre he tenido devoción por Hook, por Capitán Garfio. Yo soy más de los malos. También son valientes a su manera, ¿no?
En términos de arte, ¿a quién meterías en tu lista?
Ah, tengo muy claro. Bach, sin duda. O sea, soy un loco de Bach. Pese a que muchos artistas consideran que Bach no fue especialmente valiente porque no rompió esquemas, pero para mí también fue un síntoma de valentía ser conservador, en cierto modo.
David Simon es mi valiente. The Wire es una serie magistral porque David Simon decide explicar la realidad desde la ficción, que es desde el único sitio donde puedes decir absolutamente toda la verdad.
There's one thing to be heroic, and there's another thing to be brave. I think that if I'm looking at someone like Michelangelo, I mean, that was heroic. Is that brave? Is that the same bravery as someone like Eric Satie, who never had any success at all, really? and yet he never gave up.
Bertrand Russell sería otro valiente.
Herzog, en cine.
Peter Sellers.
Antonio López.
En danza te diría Pina Bausch.
Je pense à Picasso parce que c'est quelqu'un qui ne s'est jamais accommodé à une zone de confort.
Rembrandt. Now, Rembrandt, for me, is another beautiful loser. And yet he never stopped doing what he had to do.
Andy Warhol sería un valiente, ¿no? Cuando dice, todo puede ser arte.
Bach es un superhéroe. Beethoven es un superhéroe.
With the Third Symphony by Beethoven, the world of music changed forever. This piece came out smack in the middle of the Romanticism. It was the year 1804, and a new way of understanding the world of music had been born. Beethoven was the first musician to confront aristocracy head-on and establish his own artistic criteria. He was the first creative genius. Up until then, musicians like I don't know, like Bach, for instance, or Telemann, up until then, musicians were nothing more than employees to this aristocrat or that king, and they would compose wherever their lord demanded. But with Beethoven, all that changed. He bravely challenged this status quo and said, there are and will be 1,000 princes, but there is only one Beethoven. He was the first to land a contract where the aristocracy would pay him a living wage in order to compose wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and however he wanted. He was a man of courage, the first musician that, as a creator, managed to take the range of his own destiny. And he did so with the Third Symphony, which happens to be called the Eroica Symphony because with these notes, he became the hero of his own music. That's why Beethoven is the third hero, the third person of courage in my Valhalla.
Next up on my list of the brave, Joan of Arc, a young peasant girl who lived in a village in northeastern France. Her life was going along peacefully until at 13, she started to hear the voice of God. A voice that called on her to go to Orleans and fight for her king, Charles VII, against the English who had the city under siege. Anyone else would have asked, what business is it of mine, a 13-year-old girl, to go off to war? But not her. She never hesitated and began her journey. At just 17, young Joan rode her horse, surrounded by soldiers. She was dressed in silver armor, dressed like a medieval hero. She was a brave woman and a brilliant strategist who led the French army to victory. Back then, women didn't have it easy. Joan, the most authentic, most loyal and bravest of women, was strict and sentenced to die, burned at the stake for apostasy and heresy. That's how, at just 19, in 1431, Joan of Arc, my biggest heroine and the greatest heroine of France, died in the flames. A fact that lays bare to what extent women have always had it more difficult, even in art.
I think for me, a lot of female artists in general would be I would consider to be brave beyond brave.
Une femme artiste très courageuse, c'est Louise Bourgeois.
Y Inma Chacón es una escritora que me parece muy valiente.
Alicia Alonso, la bailarina.
Patti Smith.
Lo que me viene así a bote pronto como mujer valiente es Frida Kahlo.
J.K. Rowling, you know, she was consistently denied, but in the end, she had a great and beautiful mind, and she shared it with everyone, and everybody loves her work.
Una de las artistas que yo más he admirado desde hace muchísimo tiempo es Gloria Fuertes.
Teresa Pamies, Ana María Matute, dos mujeres que lucharon por sus ideales y por su libertad.
Frances McDormand me parece una actriz valiente, además productora.
Somebody like Nina Simone, for example. When society was not only against her, but all of her people, she became an activist. That's brave, when you're taking your art and you're using it for a higher message.
Let's continue. These guys are training for a slingshot championship, a time-honored sporting activity in the Balearic Islands. And the tradition goes back to 5 centuries before Christ, when the slingers of these islands were a crucial part of the Carthaginian armies. But if we are going to talk about slingers, there is one who towers over all the others, David, the 5th person of courage in my Valhalla, the protagonist in the mythical story of David and Goliath. A hero and a story that I bet these young slingers know well.
¿No suena una historia que es muy famosa de David y Goliat?
No.
Es una historia que está en la Biblia, es una historia muy importante dentro de la tradición judeocristiana. ¿No os suena? Bueno, David, pequeño, joven, es capaz de enfrentarse a Goliat, que es alguien mucho más fuerte que él, mucho más poderoso, mucho más grande, y se enfrenta, ¿cómo? Con una honda. Él es hondero y le derrota con una piedra. Entonces él es uno de mis superhéroes, uno de mis valientes preferidos, porque es alguien que siendo mucho más pequeño, siendo mucho más débil, es capaz de enfrentarse sin temor, con mucha valentía y con mucho coraje, a alguien que es mucho más fuerte que él. Entonces, ahora que sabemos quién es David, ¿qué es lo que os llama la atención de este cuadro?
La cabeza.
La cabeza.
¿Por qué?
Porque tiene sangre. Y porque está cortada.
Exactamente. Primero le ha derrotado con la honda y después le ha cortado la cabeza. ¿Qué más cosas?
Parece un vaso.
Parece un vaso. En realidad es un escudo. En lugar de ser un escudo de armas, es un escudo con una pintura maravillosa de este pintor que se llama Andrea del Castaño y que lo pintó de este modo para ir encima de un escudo. ¿De acuerdo? Seguimos. Cositas que nos llamen la atención.
La cabeza.
La cabeza.
La cabeza.
¿Cómo es esta cabeza?
Muy grande.
Muy grande. ¿Por qué es muy grande?
Porque es un gigante.
¿Es un gigante?
Porque es un gigante o porque el pintor que ha pintado esto, que se llama Guido Reni, lo que quiere es mostrarnos que David se ha enfrentado a alguien mucho más grande que él. ¿Qué más? La posición de él. ¿Cómo está él?
Pues... ¿De chulo? Sí.
¿De chulo?
Sí.
Está de chulo. Está de príncipe. De hecho, esto es un cuadro del barroco del año 1600 más o menos, tiene este gorro, que es el gorro típico de la aristocracia, de los príncipes, para demostrar que David no es solo un joven, sino que es un joven de sangre real, es alguien que viene de un linaje real. Siguiente cuadro. Un cuadro de Rubens, también del barroco, también más o menos del año 1600. Cosas que hay en este cuadro que no había en los otros.
Una guerra.
¿Qué más?
Una espada.
¿Qué más?
Hay más violencia.
Hay más violencia. Muy bien.
¿Que la cabeza no está cortada?
Que la cabeza no está cortada. Muy bien, vamos por pasos. Vemos aquí que el episodio de David y Goliat no es un episodio aislado, sino que se enmarca dentro de una gran batalla. Y aquí vemos a todos estos guerreros con sus escudos plateados, con sus armaduras, yendo hacia la batalla. Y tú has dicho que había más violencia. En realidad no creo que haya más violencia, sino que lo que hay es más acción, porque es el momento de la acción de cortarle la cabeza. ¿Ok? Siguiente. Caravaggio, también del barroco. Cositas que nos llamen la atención de este cuadro.
Que le está cogiendo de los pelos.
Que le está cogiendo de los pelos. Hombre, si tienes una cabeza, tal vez lo más práctico sea cogerle de los pelos, ¿no? ¿Qué os dice la cara de este Goliat?
Está muerto.
Está muerto.
Está como medio vivo.
Está muerto, pero medio vivo. Sí, es exactamente eso. David le ha vencido, lo sostiene, como dices tú muy bien, por los pelos, se lo está mirando, pero él tiene los ojos abiertos y la boca abierta. Casi como si quisiera miraros, ¿sí? Casi como si quisiera miraros y casi como si quisiera hablaros. Porque Caravaggio es así, él intenta captar siempre lo más, ¿cómo decirlo?, lo más profundo de lo que está sucediendo. Una cosita más, el cuadro es totalmente negro. ¿Se ve el pelo de él?
No.
Muy poco.
No. Pero a pesar de que no se ve el pelo de él, ¿se entiende perfectamente que él le está cogiendo por los pelos?
Sí.
¿Cómo puede ser eso si no se ve el pelo?
Porque el fondo, al ser negro, destaca los colores de David, que lo está cogiendo.
Exactamente, porque está pintando el cuadro con una técnica que se llama técnica del claro
Oscuro.
Técnica del claroscuro. Es decir, Caravaggio lo que hacía primero era pintar todo el lienzo de color negro y después, a partir del lienzo de color negro, él sacaba las formas. Y entonces aquí, a pesar de que prácticamente no vemos nada, lo único que vemos de su pelo es esto.
Sí.
¿Sí?
Y el flequillo.
Y esto de aquí, y este flequillo. Y entendemos que todo esto es pelo,
Sí.
pero no se ve. ¿Eh? Eso es una cosa genial de Caravaggio. Y último David, que no es un cuadro, es una escultura. Ahí vamos. Este nos hace risa.
Sí.
¿Por qué?
Porque está desnudo.
Bueno, está desnudo, pero tiene un cuerpo perfecto, ¿no?
Sí.
Bueno, sí, no, bueno, es un cuerpo perfecto. Lo que me gustaría que pudiéramos intentar averiguar de esta escultura es, en los demás cuadros hemos visto que él ya había vencido a Goliat, que le había cortado la cabeza o que le estaba cortando la cabeza, pero aquí no está Goliat. Entonces ¿qué está haciendo él? ¿Estudiando dónde está Goliat para tirarle la piedra?
Sí.
¿O, al contrario, ya le ha tirado la piedra y está viendo cómo cae?
Ya le ha tirado la piedra.
Levantad la mano todos los que penséis que ya le ha tirado la piedra. Levantad, vale, levantad la mano todos los que penséis que está estudiando cómo le va a tirar la piedra. No se vale levantar la mano las dos veces. No se vale. Así, ¿no? Sois así. No se vale. No se vale. Sea como sea, esta es una de las, bueno, seguramente la escultura más perfecta y maravillosa que hizo Michelangelo Buonarroti, que es el autor de esta escultura.
Every time I see this immense statue of over 5 meters in height, I'm absolutely blown away by its perfection, its elegance, its strength, its beauty, and its optical illusion. Michelangelo sculpted the head, the right hand, and the upper part of David's body bigger than the lower part. That way, from the position we observe him in, at his feet, we get the sense that he is perfectly proportioned. If we were to take him off his pedestal and look at him straight on, he would look like he has a huge head. No, Michelangelo sculpted him masterfully, smaller below and bigger above, so that, looking up at him on his pedestal, he looks like exactly what he is, the absolute perfection of the human body.
Contemplating this David, I can help but think that this wonder, which looks alive, was nothing more than a huge block of marble brought to Florence along the River Arno. A couple of sculptors started working on it, but overwhelmed by the huge job,
left behind some cracks and holes in the block. Michelangelo took this battered block of marble and with the only help of his genius, hammer and chisel, he created this wonder. He worked over 2 years without rest, without ever messing up. Not a single mistake. When he was asked how he was capable of something so incredible, he answered easily. The Davide was always in the marble. I just took away everything else.
When they told me I was young, I thought that you'd be happy.
David is currently on view inside the Galleria dell'Accademia to protect it from the elements, but it was originally located in Piazza della Signoria, outside the Palazzo Vecchio, where there is now a replica so that we can imagine, at least a little bit, the enjoyment that the Florentines back then must have felt while gazing at it. With the mastery of his perfect optical illusion, it's as if over 500 years ago Michelangelo had solved the disproportion we all suffer when we take a selfie on our phones. It's kind of crazy we keep taking selfies considering how bad we look in them. If Michelangelo could see it, I bet he'd pull his hair out by the roots.
When your heart was beating out loud, I sing your name and I sing it loud. Where I'm from, reason to shout you, I sing your name and I sing it loud. Where I'm from, there's no need to shout it.
If I had to choose just one work from all the art in Florence, I'd probably go with Michelangelo's David. That said, it's almost impossible to choose. Just a quick stroll through this city is enough to show you that it is packed with art. Art with each step and around every corner. And sometimes so much beauty can be dangerous. For certain sensitive souls, too much artistic beauty can cause heart palpitations, vertigo, confusion, and even hallucinations. It's known as the Florence syndrome or the Stendhal syndrome after this French writer who was the first to describe the phenomenon, because he actually experienced it when he visited the Basilica della Santa Croce, where are buried the great Rossini and Michelangelo himself. And going on with my Valhalla, I wouldn't be surprised if my next man of courage experienced this syndrome. In fact, I think it would explain a lot.
Hello, sorry. Could we stop the show for a second, please? Yes, hold on. Okay, thank you, great. It's just, I'm sorry. It's just I realized something. We're running out of time on the show, and I might not have room to add two heroes to my list. Leonardo da Vinci, who you know also dreamed of flying, and Gian Lorenzo Bernini, the sculptor who has taken me to the skies more times than any other. Da Vinci and Bernini, besides being two extraordinary artists, they have something else in common, something that I love and makes me admire them even more. They both were lucky enough to reach old age without ever stopping working, totally dedicated to their art. Leonardo died at 67, which 500 years ago was a ripe old age, and Bernini reached, attention, 82. extraordinary for his time. And right up to shortly before their deaths, they both kept creating and expressing themselves because art wasn't their job, it wasn't their occupation. Art was their life. And you know, when something is a part of your being, of your essence, it's impossible to abandon it. So I aspire to be like them. I aspire for age, for old age to catch me working. So may bravery, energy, and desire to create never, never die. But before that, we'd better get back to the show, okay? So, let's continue.
Let's continue. Alonso Quijano, Don Quixote, is another of my heroes, a model of tenacity, nobility, and courage. One of his last adventures took place here in Barcelona, in my hometown, a city that he himself defines as archives of courtesy, shelter of the foreigners, hospital of the poor, fatherland of the brave, vengeance of the offended, and pleasant correspondence of firm friendship, and in sight and in beauty, unique. Wow, he couldn't come up with a better slogan. Don Quixote and Sancho Panza entered Barcelona along this street, Moncada Street, where today the Picasso Museum can be found. From here they went all over the city until they reached the beach. Of course, it was a little bit emptier back then. Here the night of the white moon was waiting for them. He wanted Don Quixote to admit that his own lady was more beautiful than Don Quixote's. Don Quixote refused, of course, and they fought a duel. The deal was, if Don Quixote lost, he'd have to admit that his lady was not the most beautiful, go back to his hometown, and spend a year without touching a weapon.
Don Quixote was beaten by the night of the white moon and was forced to keep his word. He would take a year sabbatical from the cavalry, but his lady, Dulcinea del Toboso, was still the most beautiful in the world, claimed Don Quixote. He is the defeated but magnificent eighth hero in my Valhalla. A knight who, although was treated like a madman, he never stopped fighting for his ideals, for what's right, for freedom, for justice, for honor, and of course, for the love of his lady.
I've nearly got my list complete, but what about you? Are you brave?
Personalmente nunca me he considerado valiente, entre otras cosas porque en mi infancia y en mi juventud el concepto de valiente era un concepto así como de muy echado pa'lante. Yo nunca he sido echado pa'lante.
¿Y tú eres valiente?
La gente me dice que yo soy valiente, pero yo no tengo una percepción de mí misma como valiente. No tengo pudor, ni vergüenza, ni miedo.
No, no creo que sea valiente. No, la verdad es que no. No sé, yo hago mi trabajo, ¿no? Y alguien dirá, pero eres muy valiente, te aprendes un texto, subes a un escenario, lo dices, te juzgan. Pero es que es mi trabajo.
Pues sí, me considero una persona valiente. Yo soy de que cuando siento las cosas, las hago. Y me tiro a la piscina.
Yo soy valiente en mi trabajo y un perfecto cobarde en muchas cosas de la vida personal.
I'm not a coward. I'm willing to take risks, sometimes to the point of stupidity. I don't know if I would consider that brave.
La cobardía es tal vez lo que me define como persona. Pero, igual que me critico en esto, puedo elogiarme y decir que la valentía es lo que me puede definir como humorista.
I know that if the circumstances arrive where I have to protect somebody that I love, or even some work of art that I love, I would probably be much braver than I would consider myself in a normal, everyday life.
Well, we've reached the end of this journey. I bet you have all made your list of the brave by now at the same time as I was making mine. Because we all have our heroes, people or characters who become our role models, people who give us strength and motivate us to keep going. But my list is still missing one person. It's missing the most important.
We've reached the end of our journey. Bravery is not just a virtue for heroes and heroines. We all can be brave, especially when confronting art, when we're standing before a painting, before a sculpture, when we're listening to a piece of music, when we read in a book. We should do it with bravery, with courage, with audacity, in order to understand that painting, that sculpture, that piece of music, or that book. Remember, who creates the work of art, it's the one who makes it. But the person who truly gives it life is the one admiring it, listening to it, reading it. You, all of you, you all can be the bravest of the brave. You all can be heroes. That's why you all are the 9 heroes of my personal Valhalla.